Welcome. I'm Gretchen Sable, and I'm here today with League of Women Voters ABC. The League of Women Voters ABC serves northern Hennepin County and western Anoka County. We're a local league that meets the second Monday of every month in the Andover Senior Center, which is located next to Andover City Hall, 6 o'clock on the second Monday of the month. I think that if you're interested in a number of issues, you would be interested in League of Women Voters. We cover a large number of educational issues, and we also do advocacy on things like pollinators that we're doing today. If you want to learn more about League, you can Google up LWV ABC, and you'll find information on us and what we're covering in each meeting. I will read you now the mission of League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters ABC is a grassroots, nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose any candidate or political party. One more note, even though we are the League of Women Voters, we do welcome both genders, and so certainly we have male members and we would love to have more male members. So anybody that's interested in participating with us can do that, and you're welcome. Today we're going to be talking about pollinators, and it's kind of a different word to think about pollinators, but we're talking about honeybees, butterflies, and other flower-visiting insects that perform a vital function for our society and our life. These, what they do is they pollinate the flowers that bring us the food that we eat. And these insects are in trouble because of habitat loss, pesticide use, and diseases that are pushing their populations to the brink of failure. Biologists have been predicting for years that we might be facing a pollinator crisis, where there's not enough bees and other flower-visiting insects to go around. If this happens, yields of crops will decrease and the food prices will increase significantly. Some foods might even vanish from our shelves. About 3/4 of all the crops depend to some extent on pollinators, including most fruits and vegetables, many of them high-value fruits like strawberries, apples, blueberries, and tomatoes. When you think about pollinators, you think about honeybees, but actually there's a lot of native pollinators that are really important to this topic as well. And so we use the more general term pollinators when we talk about this because we mean both the honeybees that we're used to and the pollinators, the bumblebees, the flies and moths and other insects that move from flower to flower. So I'll use that more general term pollinator when we're doing this meeting today. The loss of pollinators will affect us when we shop for food. Without insect pollinators, plants will yield less and prices will rise. The benefit of pollinators at this point is estimated to be about $3 billion a year in our country. We get that much increased yield and different crops because of the pollinators. If we don't take measures now to protect and improve pollinator habitat, we will lose that benefit and our cost will greatly increase. Pollinators are essential to our environment as well. They provide an ecological service by pollinating wildflowers and plants that are essential for birds and animals throughout the wild kingdom. Looking back to crops, the United States alone grows more than 100 crops that either need or benefit from pollinators. And again, the economic value of that is estimated at $3 billion a year. A lot of attention has been focused on honeybees, and these honeybees, they pollinate commercial crops. They produce the honey that we use every day, and they're dying at an alarming rate. The state has estimated right now that about 1/3 of the colonies of honeybees die out each year. Most people don't know that honeybees aren't native to North America. They were brought here by European settlers. And so they're vital for the foods that the Europeans brought with them. But we also have our native pollinators that do plants that are native to North America, like cranberries, pumpkins, blueberries, things that were found here when the settlers came here. So it's important that we remember that we're looking at this whole spectrum of insects and that we need them to help us keep our way of life. The main threats facing pollinators are habitat loss, degradation, and fragmentation. You know, when you think about how the landscape has changed from series of woodlands and meadows and wetlands to yards, streets, farms, and all kinds of things that are much more barren in terms of flowers, you can see that there's a loss of habitat and a real need for additional bee food. Migratory pollinators like monarch butterflies are especially vulnerable because they have to travel long distances, and if there's not patches of suitable habitat along their path, they won't make it. So those are things that we can take measures on now, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Pollinators need good quality food throughout the year too, so we are looking at some different ways to have plants that bloom throughout the blooming season. You can't just have one kind of thing that goes for a month. You have to make sure that they've got a whole spectrum of food throughout the growing season. And so those are some other things that we'll talk about. Our goal in this meeting today is to find ways that we can work locally on this issue. There's actions being taken at the federal, state, and local level. We'll talk about some of those, but we really want to focus here on the local level. We have with us 3 speakers who represent some different areas here. I'll talk about that in a second. But locally, these are things that we can do today in our everyday decisions that we can work with our cities on. And we're going to ask the people that have come here today to sign up to be part of City B teams. Our goal is to have teams that work with the cities that the League of Women Voters ABC serves, which would be Champlin, Anoka, Ramsey, Andover, Blaine, Coon Rapids, Ham Lake, East Bethel, and to go to these cities and to say to the city people, the resource technicians, the mayors, let's find ways to manage our city lands without pesticides. Let's find ways to have more pollinator-friendly plantings in our parks and to manage our parklands so that there's more bee habitat. So that's our goal in this, and also to know what we need to do in our yards. So we have good pollinator habitat in our yards. We'll also be taking questions from the audience, and so people will get a chance to ask more, get more information. And again, we'd like to have people signing up to be on these B teams, so think of that, and we'll get to that. With us today, we have Patricia Hauser. Patricia is a member of League of Women Voters from Shorewood.
Correct, South Tonka.
South Tonka League. Mm-hmm. And she has started an organization called Humming for Bees, and she'll tell you her story. And we're excited to have her with us. A lot of what Patricia is doing will help us to see what we as citizens can do in our yards, because you've got a lot of advocacy you're doing in that. Plus she's working at different levels with advocacy, so she'll share that as well. We have Joan Spence with us. Joan is with the Anoka Conservation District. She's a wetland specialist there. And we're looking at the state level, which Joan represents by proxy. The state government has a number of things that the state's doing. We had a pollinator initiative that passed the legislature recently, and the state agencies, the DNR has a very good website, so you can look at the Minnesota DNR website. Did you know that the DNR manages 10% of the lands in the state? And so as DNR does things to improve habitat on the 10% of the lands they manage, that'll have a big impact in our state. The Minnesota Department of Transportation is looking at ways to have pollinator-friendly habitat along road right-of-ways. And so that effort's going on. And then there's money available for projects. And a lot of these projects are water quality projects that can have incidental benefit for pollinators. And so Joan is the wetland specialist for the Anoka Conservation District, which is the county arm of the state programs. And so state programs flow through the county, and Joan is going to talk about the projects that they do and how that works. Our third speaker is Mary Monty. Mary is with NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is a branch of the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And Mary works with farmers and other, well, big farmers and small farmers, I guess is the way to say that. We were talking before the meeting that a farmer doesn't have to be someone with thousands of acres of corn. It can be someone with a CSA kind of an operation or other kinds of places that make money from agriculture. And so Mary works with farmers and finding ways to build pollinator habitat through a federal initiative. So she'll talk about that. So there we go. And I'll just turn it over to Patricia, and she can start.
Okay. Thanks. I want to say, Gretchen, that I'm really excited to be here, because having bee teams and to go out to all those cities you mentioned is just a great opportunity for Minnesota to really grow. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can make a difference, can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Those are the words of Margaret Mead, and they sure apply to the League of Women Voters and the work that they do. One of the things I'd like to share is just how we got started as a small group. My husband's a beekeeper, and this past year in 2013, in the fall, we had our best crop of honey ever. It was like 50 pounds, and for us, we were able to say, well, what are we going to do with this extra honey? And we decided to share it with our friends, but with the caveat that they would send a $5 donation to the Center for Food Safety, because we had been learning about the plight of bees and what you were saying in the beginning about the situation, how awful it was and how threatening. So we did, and they responded happily. We were hoping that, they'd keep on learning from them. And we kept learning. As we learned, we decided there was something more we had to do. We couldn't just say we cared about bees and we wanted to raise them. So we decided to start a group. We called up some friends and said, hey, you want to get together? Are you interested in working with the bees? Do you know what's happening with them? And they said, yes. I mean, they'd been reading and the things in the newspaper. So we called them up, got together with them, and that was like January 12th of last year. We decided that what we wanted to do is to educate ourselves, to learn more about bees, and to educate others, and then to make a change in one small city. There were about 7 of us. That was the core group. But there were lots of other people who were interested on the outside but just didn't have time for meetings or whatever. There was a place for everybody. So when you have your people meet together in their bee teams, make sure that they give, I hope they will remember to give their information so that you can contact them again for those important meetings and things. Anyway, we met with, started meeting there. We met at public libraries so we could have a kind of a neutral space and central space. And we decided what we would do, we'd figured out a name that wasn't taken and had a name for ourselves. We developed some signs, that's here, Bee Safe Yard signs, because we thought we want people to know about how to take care of bees. And we had a pledge to go along with that. They could only get the sign if they signed a pledge, and if they, and we asked for a donation of $5 to help cover the cost of the sign and some of the literature we had. So we started with that, and we contacted the mayor, I think it was of Shorewood. We wanted to do it in one small city, so we thought Shorewood was a good place to start, even though we were from the West Metro area, and we had members from Minnetonka, from St. Louis Park, and from Shorewood. And he met with my husband and I, and we showed him a video of Dr. Marla Spivak's. Perhaps you've seen it. The Why Bees Are Disappearing. It's a 15-minute TED Talk. And then asked him for time. We didn't go into what we wanted for a resolution or what we wanted to have happen. We just said, we want time at your city hall meeting so we can tell people about this, tell the council about it, because we'd like them to pass a resolution. We saved that resolution until we got to the actual meeting. At that time, we had a PowerPoint, and we told them the situation with bees. One of the things we talked about, of course, was the systemic pesticides. Systemic pesticides are relatively new. I think they're like 20 years old or maybe a little older. They've been around for a while, but they're the most widely used pesticide in the world. Right now, in fact, imidacloprid is a member of the Neonicotinoid family. That's a big, long word. It took me 3 weeks to learn how to say it. But I'm a former first grade teacher, so I broke it down. Neonicotinoid. Neonicotinoid. Then I practiced it for about 3 weeks. And we call it neonics for short. This group of systemic pesticides makes the whole plant a poison factory. The root, the stem, the leaves, even the nectar and the pollen are poisonous. The unintended consequence, of course, is that all kinds of critters are being affected. The butterflies and bees, the non-targeted insects are being affected. For honeybees and for wild bees, and there's like, I think I heard 20,000 species of bees worldwide. I think in Minnesota maybe there's 4,000. So there's honeybees and bumblebees. That's all I knew when my husband started beekeeping. Those 2 bees, I thought all bees fit there. No, there's thousands of wild bees, some that never sting, that are tiny, that are different sizes and different colors. They're quite magnificent, and it's really exciting. I know you mentioned Heather Holmes' book. That's a great book. It's on our website, by the way. Anyway, the systemic pesticides, with their neonicotinoids, they can be they can come around a seed so that the seed is coated, and if a bird eats the seed, they're in trouble. They get affected by this poison. And when it goes into the soil, it affects the soil. And the effects can stay for up to, months to years. Also, another way of having these systemic pesticides is by a soil, so seeds, soil drench, injection of the tree, or a spray. And so many other creatures are affected by this. Also, there's a drift that can happen. I was at the legislature hearing Steve Ellis from the western part of Minnesota. He's a beekeeper, a commercial beekeeper. He had many beehives lined up over one side of the road. On the other side of the road was a farmer planting seeds, and those seeds ended up having this little dust come off, and the dust drifted over, touched his beehives, the bees went down. He pulled out his cell phone and recorded it. And not all of the bees inside died, but that's how potent this is. And so for a bee, it means that maybe they can't forage well, they forget how to do their waggle dance to tell where the forage is, they can't find their way home, and they get really sick. When we first went to Shorewood, we had a very clear, simple little resolution. It was something, it just said really clearly that we wanted to turn areas into bee-safe areas, public spaces. And by the way, the only way, with a resolution, the city can't say that this will take place for all cities. It can only legislate for the particular city. And that's because in all but 7 states, laws have been passed such that only the state can decide what should be done on private land and public land both. And we also asked them to plant pesticide-free flowers, to not spray the bee food after they plant these pesticide-free flowers, to educate citizens about the bees' needs and their gifts, and to begin this spring to implement the resolution. Oh, one more thing, to publish a Bee Safe City progress report each year. The City Council, after we met with them, we had a number of different discussions. A number of times we went back and we talked to the park group. And then the city asked if we just would reword things. So they reworded it in a way that was comfortable for them. They said, hey, this is important. If we're going to be the first city in Minnesota to do something like this, we want to be worded a little bit differently. And we knew some things had to be, we're interested in changing them. Because one of the things we didn't say in the actual resolution was about systemic pesticides. And we had changed the wording in that as we were discussing. We had talked about it in our PowerPoint presentation and said this is what this point means about pesticide-free flowers, because we're talking about these systemics. Anyway, one of the key things in the new resolution is, the second part says, the city shall refrain from the use of systemic pesticides on Shorewood city property, including pesticides from the neonicotinoid family. This is a huge thing because it means that they're not going to be using these things. They're going to ask before they get any new plants for the city, and they're going to help. They also agreed to help educate the citizens. One of the things they've already done, that was in February that we met. In March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, 8 months, they had something in the Shorewood city paper, the Shorewood little newsletter, I should say, that came out talking about bees and how to take care of them and how to, support the pollinators. I also want to mention how the League of Women Voters, that South Tonka, helped Humming for Bees. They agreed, when we talked with them, they agreed to support the concept of bee-safe cities. And they also asked us to publish an article, to write an article for the newsletter. We wrote one called Ask Before You Buy, and the importance of doing that. They put it in, the state league saw it and asked that it be published, if they could publish it, and then we asked them, once it was published, if we could have it back to use as a handout when we were doing tabling events or talking with individuals, and they said yes, of course. And the League of Women Voters on South Tonka also shared their booth. They have a booth at different times at the Excelsior Farmers Market. So they had a 1 month, they met from, I think, June until October. And they allowed us to have our signs and our information at that booth. We were joining them on Crazy Days in Excelsior and Apple Day Festival. And there we were able to meet many different people and share our information. Our members of the League of Women Voters also came to the city meetings. And so whenever we met with the city council, we didn't come just as a group of 5 or 7 or 10 or whatever. We had at least 15 people there each time, and it varied. And the members afterwards would write a letter to the editor in support. One of the things I'd like to recommend is that people really use our website. We have a website called www.hummingforbees.org, and there it's really, you're able to go to a wonderful section called resources. We think this is really cool because we have free videos on there. There's one video that's called Time for the Talk. It's a 2-minute video about like a 3rd grader talking to his dad about how he needs to take care of bees. Another one is called Clover in Your Lawn. It's about, the fact that clover is great bee food. And actually, dandelions and creeping Charlie is also great bee food. The other thing is on there is a 15-minute video that we shared with the mayor and the city council and with anyone who tends to listen to us from time to time, because it's a short one, the Marla Spivak TED Talk. So that can be accessed immediately. We also have listed in another section about DVDs 4 award-winning DVDs and their trailers. So if you're thinking of going to the public library in the process of educating yourselves to get these DVDs, or if you want to buy some that the League does, to have them available and show them or show them publicly. One in particular that we used was called Vanishing Bees. And it talks about the commercial beekeepers and when colony collapse first started happening, and the farmer who thought maybe he was just a bad beekeeper. Not the farmer, the beekeeper who thought he was maybe just a bad beekeeper. We also have a number of research articles. And one of the research articles that I'd strongly recommend, that is the research article by, it's WIA, Worldwide Integrated Assessment. It's by the Task Force on Systemic Pesticides. It's very current. It's about scientists who are not industry funded, but independent scientists, very respected from around the world, who took the studies and went through them and came up with their conclusions. It's an excellent, that's under resources on our website. Also there, if you don't want to read the whole many pages, we've got the press release, which is 3 pages, and the media briefing notes, which is like about 7 pages. There's also a section, and I'll just get to this, and then I'll stop it. That's called Getting the Word Out. And under that, we tell exactly how we did it, how we gathered people together, how we went to the city council, the things that happened. In fact, a couple of the points there would be like getting started, public outreach, getting the resolution passed, considerations, and I guess one of the main considerations, you already know this, of course, is when you're working with city officials, they work hard, and we were not an adversarial group going in. We were there to work with them to make it work in Shorewood. The other thing that I'd just like to say is it's so important that you be informed, that you inform others, and that's one of the things about the yard sign. We have the yard sign, Be Safe Yard. We developed this because we thought you can see it across the street. If a car is going by, they can still read it. They don't have to stop. If they want to read more about it, like our website, they have to stop, but otherwise they can see it. Also, it's a great conversation starter. Our neighbors would come up and say, "Excuse me, but what does it mean you have a Be Safe Yard?" And then we'd say, well, that means we have signed a pledge which says we won't buy pre-poisoned plants. We won't poison the plants after we buy them. We'll keep learning about bees. That's basically the pledge. It's a little fancier because it names neonicotinoids and systemic pesticides. And so that's it. And I guess, I think of all the things that there are that are worrying all of us these days, and I find it really kind of scary myself when I listen to the news or read online what's happening. And this, working with bees, has been a really hopeful thing in that if you care about something, you need to act on it. And in acting on this part about bees, well, I want to say this first. Maud Barlow, who works with water, she's a Canadian activist, she said hope is a moral imperative. It's like we haven't got the time to be in despair or in apathy or inactive. We have to do something. And when you care, you act. At least I find when I care about something, I act on it. And then when I act, I feel hopeful because I know I'm doing what I can, and then I can let go of some of the other stuff. So when you get with your people, and the people who sign up today, they have a wonderful opportunity when they're working with the League, of course, to really make a difference for pollinators and for their city too.
Well, thank you. I think that any problem that has a solution of having more flowers is a hopeful problem.
Yes, I do too.
So, Joan, we're going to turn to you now. Joan is going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can work and get technical assistance, too, from the Conservation District in our projects and our planning and our working with the cities.
Thank you. And I really appreciate what you say about hope and, you know, what can you do? And I got started into this kind of conversation as a wetland specialist and doing wetland mitigation and native restoration. And then you were asking about funding. And there are many projects going on, and we also have a web page, the swcd.org. And I really encourage you to look at those projects because it gives you an idea of the kind of things that get funded. And you will notice for shoreland stabilization, doesn't sound like pollinators, but what are you going to stabilize the shoreland with? Plants. And where are you going to find those plants? Native vegetation and grasses and flowering plants, shrubs, trees. And I've talked to native suppliers just around our office in Ham Lake, and they don't use more spray or pesticides because it doesn't make sense. You don't spend the money. But if we keep demanding that our plants have to be perfect, what are the suppliers going to do? So if we are more acceptable of ourselves with blemishes, we should be more acceptable of plants with blemishes, and I think that'll solve a lot of that problem. But getting back to native vegetation, a lot of the projects you'll see are water quality, stormwater management. Once again, how do you do that? By planting native plants, flowering plants. And we have many projects with rain gardens and like I said, shoreland stabilization and restoration. And then there's the watershed districts. Now that could be a project on a much larger scale. And I think if we go to and talk to our watershed districts, talk to our cities, talk to the folks that are mentioned in these projects that are already being funded, where else can we do this? Then we can keep that momentum going. And at the Anoka Conservation District, we have a lot of technical support for people. And once again, on our website, we have many different electronic brochures, and we talk about all these different practices that we support, and a lot of them are involving planting native vegetation. And I brought this book because I use it as my Bible. It's the native plant list for identifying native plant communities. And within each one, there's a list of the grasses, forbs, trees. And I want to encourage people, yes, flowering plants, that's the food source. But pollinators and all animals need habitat, need shelter, sources of water. So it's not just planting flowers, you have to plant the community of plants that naturally go together. And if each one of us thinks of our yard as our little ecosystem that we can take care of, we don't need big funding projects, just what we naturally do. And we can go and plant the trees and shrubs and create these little oases. And if we all do that, we're creating a corridor between these larger parcels. And getting back to what you were saying about having bee-safe neighborhoods and then the continuum throughout the landscape. And I think we have to realize that each little thing we do makes a difference. If you back up, go in that airplane and look down from 30,000 feet, and you'll see that we're all pretty much connected. So if we need to kind of back off instead of just look at our little yard. I think one way to look at that is we have a human ecological niche. As we drive to the grocery store and we drive to work and we drive to our friends and all these, there's our corridor, and we want it to be safe. So as we plant these flowers and shrubs in our landscape, we're creating corridors for the pollinators and other wildlife. So I think that's the most important message that I have is please call the Anoka Conservation District. We're more than happy to provide our technical expertise. Look on our website for what projects are already there. See what kind of, where the funds actually go. And let's get together and see what else we can do.
Thank you very much. One of the points that Joan made too is that the watershed districts have funding too for rain gardens and some of these projects. And so if you do have a project of a larger scale, we can see if there are ways that we can find
nice.
some of the funds to do that, which would be important to cities, I think, too. Now, Mary's with the federal government, like I said. She works for the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and she's going to talk to us some about how agriculture plays a role here. I think that when we think of pesticides, we always think that we should point the finger at farmers, and really it's all of us and the work that we do. We can all be part of the solution, and we can't necessarily say that any one part of it is bigger than the other. So, Mary, what is the federal government doing to promote healthy environment for honeybees?
Okay, what we've been doing for years, we've been providing technical and financial assistance for planting pollinators, which would be your native grass and forbs and shrubs. Up until just recently, we have not concentrated on the honeybee. In 2014, there was a honeybee effort that USDA and the agency that I work for is Natural Resources Conservation Service had in one of our environmental programs. It's part of the Farm Bill program. It's our EQIP, which is, we have acronyms, so it's Environmental Quality Incentive Program. And this program was offered in 5 states. It was Minnesota, North and South Dakota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And this year in October, the Secretary of Vilsack has awarded $4 million for those states for the 2015 funding. So this is very exciting for USDA, having a program that also, provides the finances. And so what we're working with is different conservation practices that we've normally worked with throughout, it's like 20 years since I've been with the agency, but having more of a focus on honeybees. And for this program, you need to be an agricultural producer. And there is a few other eligibility criteria that needs to be met. They have to be in compliance with highly erodible land and wetland compliance. And if they are an ag producer and have an apiary, which is 5 boxes, within a mile from where they're planning on doing a practice, they would be eligible to sign up for an application. We do take applications throughout the year. We do have the last one for the 2015 funding is this Friday. But if somebody comes in after, we take the application, and that gives us time to work with somebody to find out, what are their needs. Just having the funding doesn't work unless it's a landowner's, it's their projects, and it has to be something that works for them and also works for our program. A couple of the practices are, if it's like a critical area planting, they can plant the native grass and forbs for honeybees. We do it with grazing, and what that would be is if you have pastures, is having some flowering plants, some of the clovers and alfalfas and things like that, and leaving at least a third of those pastures from grazing till after the bloom season. Doing hayland plantings is not harvesting at least a third of your acres till after the bloom. Planting trees and shrubs, red osier dogwood, some of the berry trees and shrubs, a landowner can get cost share for doing that. There's, got a list, there was 11 core practices last year that were offered, and then there was some additional practices, like if you were doing a grazing system and you were going to, you had a pasture and you were going to block off a third of it, there was funding for doing the fencing, so you could do like a prescribed grazing system, have the livestock go through, but avoiding some of those areas. And then with this, there was wildlife habitat management was one of the practices, and they would need to do monitoring. And for Minnesota, each of the states were able to pick, how many times a month, or is it once a month, that they would be able to do the monitoring. Minnesota chose every 4 weeks that the producer would need to monitor, and that would be from July until the end of October when it stopped flowering. And what they would do is set up a transect, 2 transects for like a 20-acre field, and they would go through, and there's like a worksheet they would fill out, and it would be, these are the species that are planted. Say it was an introduced species, they had clovers and buckwheat or whatever. They would note that the buckwheat is 50% bloom, and they would just count the honeybees. And each time they would go through there, they would need to try to walk the same pace, because as you get on early in the bloom season, you're going to be having maybe less bees than you would during full bloom. So they want to be able to get an accurate amount. So this 100-foot transect, they estimate it should take about 10 minutes to walk, and you would just go through and count, okay, how many honeybees do they see? And through this initiative, USDA has worked hand in hand with the Xerxes Society, and we do have some videos for beekeepers to be able to identify quickly what are the honeybees and what are the native bees, because there are some species that look fairly close to each other. And so then the producer is going to record the information that they find, take pictures, and then turn that into their local NRCS office. And then as a field office, we compile those, send them to the state, and then they're using that as for research and what are the bees using. I've talked to different beekeepers, and excuse me, and some of them have said like red clover. The honeybees do not like it. I've had other ones say, oh yeah, their honeybees do like the red clover. So this is a new initiative, and we're learning a lot, about honeybees from this. With all of our programs, we have limited funding, so the higher, we have usually scoring sheets, and the higher an applicant ranks, the more likely they're going to be able to be funded. And so what we do is, like say with that $4 million, all the applications go in one pool, and anybody who scores the highest, it'll just keep going till we run out of funding. And some of the ways that a person could increase their score would be, are they planting an annual, or are they planting a long-term native grass and forbs or shrubs, something that's going to be around for a while, they're going to score higher. Or are they planting more species? Is it going to be like a 10 species of forbs, or is it going to be 30 species? And then we look at, within that species mix, what are the early bloom, what are the mid blooms, and what are the late blooms? So if you've got enough species for the bees throughout the year, you're going to score higher. So that's one of the things that we do work with. In the past, we've worked with a lot of larger agriculture producers, and over the last probably 5 to 10 years, we've been working with some of the smaller vegetable growers, organic producers, and so this is just an excellent program that we can offer to kind of a unique and different farmers that we've traditionally worked with.
I really appreciate the monitoring that goes on with that, because I think that if we're able to look back and see the effects of what we're doing, and to measure and monitor and learn to learn what is more effective, that will really make a good, a much better outcome for all of us. So thank you. I think we're going to take a break right now, and we'll come back with questions.
Allison is my friend. We met in school when we were younger and grew up together. We did everything together. Then one day something happened, and people started to tease her, being really mean. At first she would pretend it was no big deal, that it didn't hurt her. But after a while it started to get to her. Her grades started to slip, and she used to be such an awesome student. Then she stopped talking to everyone, even me. Now she's not around anymore, and I miss her so much. Allison was my friend.
Allison is my friend. We met in school when we were younger and grew up together. We did everything together. Then one day something happened, and people started to tease her, being really mean. At first she would pretend it was no big deal, that it didn't hurt her. But after a while it started to get to her. Her grades started to slip, and she used to be such an awesome student. Then she stopped talking to everyone, even me. Now she's not around anymore, and I miss her so much. Allison was my friend. QCTV is an award-winning community media center.
We inform citizens about the actions of their city governments.
We connect residents to the events and activities happening in their own backyard.
We engage others to provide local programming to our Channel 15.
We innovate, offering live event coverage via our website and on-demand streaming of regular programs.
We collaborate with local organizations for important community conversations.
Most importantly, QCTV tells the stories that matter to the people who live, work, and play in the communities of Andover, Anoka, Champlin, and Ramsey.
Dad?
Well, hey there, son.
We need to have the talk.
You mean?
Yes.
Like with, like?
Yes.
Are you thinking about?
Yes. The birds and the bees.
Son?
Kids at school were talking about it, so I looked on the internet to find pictures. It was beautiful. Here, take a look, Dad.
Whoa! Wait.
Dad, bees and other insects, like butterflies, moths, and even bats pollinate 80% of the world's food supply.
Of course.
You do know what pollinate means, right?
Yeah, pollen.
1 out of every 3 bites of food comes from a bee-pollinated plant. And a third of all honeybee colonies in the U.S. have vanished.
Can I have my apple back?
Father, you don't understand, do you? Bees are important. The colonies are dying. Plants will die. Stop using pesticides. Buy organic. Do it now. Sorry, Dad. You see, it's not just the bees. We have to save the birds and the butterflies, too.
Okay.
Okay, we'll finish this talk at dinner.
We're on the northern coast of Northern Ireland, and you're looking out over the Atlantic Ocean, and you're watching QCTV.
Thank you. In this last segment, we're going to talk about a little bit, kind of trying to encapsulate what you can do, both personally and with your cities, to protect neonics. So we'll start with that, and then we'll go through some questions. So if you want to start off with the what you can do part, Patricia.
Okay, what you can do, one is to be informed. Learn everything you can. Go on our website, go on other websites. We've got a number of other websites you can go to. Go to Joan's website that you mentioned, and Mary's. Inform others, use the yard sign, start conversations, rent some of those videos or buy them, invite your neighbors in, show them and talk about it afterwards. Team with the League of Women Voters ABC. Mm-hmm. That would be so incredible, a group that's going ahead to do this with so many cities. Powerful. Don't buy pre-poisoned plants next spring. Ask before you buy. We have this article on our website, Ask Before You Buy, from the League of Women Voters, and on the back there's a list of plants that bees will visit in Minnesota. This was put out by the U of M Bee Lab. We have permission to print that also. The other thing is, I'd say, support Saving America's Pollinator Act. It's up before Congress right now.
It's a federal act?
It is. So you call your congressman in Washington, D.C., ask them to support this act. They're not all signed on yet. Encourage Minnesota legislators to pass pollinator protection bills. So call them up. They passed 2 bills last year. Call them, ask them to do more, and then support them when they come up. Call Gina McCarthy at the EPA. Our EPA on the federal level says they're not going to do anything until 2018. They're going to study this. Europe has already issued a ban on 3 of the neonicotinoids, but the EPA is waiting for 4 more years from now. And then after that, there'll be extra time to implement what they come up with. So ask them to speed up the review. And then lastly, write Commissioner Frederickson, or call him, at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Ask him to prohibit neonics in the state. He actually has the power to do that. He can do that. He could say, we're going to prohibit them until the EPA passes them. I mean, even if he took that message and we stopped them, that would make a huge difference. So those are some action steps to take.
Thanks. So we have the questions from the audience now. We had them come in on cards. The first one was an oversight on my part. Define forbs for the audience. We'd use the word forbs. And what that is, that's flowering plants. So when you're looking at a prairie mix, you'd have grasses, and forbs would be the flowering plants. So that's just what forbs are. First question. Some of us would still like grass in our yard to be pretty weed-free. So what can be used for pre-emergence and other weed control that would be safe?
Well, I think rather than looking at what can you spray on it, look at the cultural practices, because that ties in with soil health, and I know the USDA has a lot with that, as do we, and it's part of all of our practices. So that means creating the right conditions within which you grow the grasses and picking the grasses that will grow best under what kind of care you can give them, what kind of soil you have, what kind of shade, sun, what other trees and shrubs are around. So I think if we look at how are we providing the place where they're going to live, how are we going to do the cultural practices, there's going to be a lot less need for spray. And that goes for anything in your yard.
Mm-hmm. May I add that I would also encourage people to plant clover. Clover was used originally. They had it in grass seed mix, and then a company decided to make pesticides, and they found that the pesticide killed the broadleaf. Clover, not just broadleaf, but clover also, not just the dandelions. And then they took it out of the mix and started calling it a weed. Clover provides nitrogen in the soil. It's great in times of drought, and it's great bee food also. Mm-hmm. So adding that, we've added that to our grass mix.
Mm-hmm. And on a larger scale, we've been promoting a lot with soil health and planting cover crops and having something on that soil all year round helps protect it. Plus, with the clovers, they provide nitrogen to the soil. They provide the beneficial bacteria and insects that help with the soil health. It raises the organic matter. So by starting out with healthy soil, you have better luck growing, you know, if it's a small yard or if it's a huge field.
Mm-hmm. And soil health soil isn't just dirt. It's not just the mineral or even just the organic matter. It's actually fungi and bacteria and all living and breathing and a community in and of itself. So I'm glad you really brought that up, because the longer you have live roots in the soil, and don't think you plant it, harvest it, and then till it up, but keep those live roots, you're actually building the soil to be healthier, which will support a healthier lawn if that's what you want to plant.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks. The next question, where do we find out plant nurseries and retail outlets that have the plants the bees need? And so I know that we've got a lot of resources up here. I will say that one thing that ABC is doing, we're putting together a list of resources, and so if you come to our website, you'll be able to find that list that we've put together for our area. Patricia's got something here?
I do, and actually on our website we have sources that you can go to, and then if you want the kind of plants, probably you can go to various. There's numerous. You just can Google it. But one of the plant sales that we had that was going on last year was at the Friends plant sale. It says, and in the middle of the article, this is all about all the plants. They have tons of native plants. And it says, no to neonicotinoids at the sale. They did not have neonicotinoid plants. The plants were clean there. People did not have to worry. And the big thing is, whenever you go any place, you have to ask before you buy.
Yeah, for anybody that's a gardener in the Twin Cities, we all know the Friends plant sale. It's what weekend? It's
Mother's Day weekend.
At the state fairgrounds.
Right. And
So,
it'll be on their website.
Yeah, and so this is one of the premier plant purchasing events in the Twin Cities.
And another one is the Anoka Conservation District. We have a plant sale, trees and shrubs, and you can get them as low as less than $1.70 per seedling. And they're going to be native, and they're going to be clean, as you put it, and there'll be certain folks there helping you pick the right ones. And this time to order is now we accept orders until April 10th.
Oh, cool.
And then we're going to have them picked up on April 25th. So we can this is great time for planting. Planning your planting.
So this is through the Anoka Conservation District,
Correct.
and you can purchase these materials even if you don't live in Anoka County.
That's right.
And it's on your website, the
Yes.
sale brochure. So
We'd like to put it on our website.
And also, if you go to Minnesota USDA NRCS website, there is a job sheet. It's a honeybee effort, and it lists all the different beneficial plants. It has their common
good.
names,
There you go.
scientific names, their bloom color, and when they do flower. Like for butterfly weed, that's flowering date is July to August. Some of them are a little bit later. Go to ironweed, that's July through September. So if you're looking at plants, trying to get something, and the hardest thing is usually getting those early ones. So a lot of the native grasses and forbs, they are a warm season grass. They come up later in the year. A lot of your introduced species, like your clovers and things like that, they grow early on. So then they do, provide some flowering. So if you're looking for just totally native flowers, try picking out ones that do bloom early in the spring and throughout the summer and the fall.
And there's trees and shrubs that flower early in the season too.
Right, yeah.
So you don't have to just think of the forbs or the
That's
flowering
right.
plants.
the next question, where do our native pollinators spend the winter?
That's a real good question.
It
There's
depends on what it is. I mean, a lot of the butterflies go down to Mexico. You've got bees that burrow into the soil. Some of the honeybees, they're in their boxes. So it depends on what it is.
Right.
Some stay here and some migrate.
And some stay as different stages in their life. Some
Yeah.
overwinter as eggs, some
Right.
overwinter as immature and pupae and like that.
I know too that there's things that we can do to help them overwinter. The Xerces Society has some resources on their website about ways you can build bee nesting materials, and so you can have artificial nests that these bees can use. And we'll get information on that on our website as well.
Excuse me, Joan. One of the things they talk about too is not cutting stems way down
yeah.
and letting them go through the winter, because some of the bees can use that as a nesting site.
It also gets more snow protection on your garden, so that's good. Here's a good question. What do you recommend for folks who find a bee or hornet nest in their yards and are concerned about safety? The natural reaction is to eradicate it with raid or hire a pest agency. What should they do?
Well, I think your private your safety is more important than anything else. But there are companies that deal with pest management, and I think they would have a really good, safe way of moving that nest or hive.
Also, the paper wasp nests, there is online a place where you can find and get a fake one to put it up, because they're very territorial.
Oh.
So if you put one up, they tend to go someplace else. The other thing I want to say about some of them is I have a friend, Nellie, who had one growing on her porch, and anyway, she decided to let it be there. And they just went about their business. And she even had her grandchildren saying, come out and sit down and be quiet, but you can watch them. And they did it through the year. It was a real learning experience. The Yellowjackets are the ones, it's not bees that you have to worry about. Bees sting, they die.
The wasps.
But the Yellowjackets are a concern, and in the fall. And then you have to figure out what it is you need to do. And I've heard of people digging out and putting boiling water at night in there, something
Yeah.
like that. And there's different ideas. In fact, on our website, there's a place called the Northwest Coalition for Alternatives to Pesticides, and they talk about that very thing.
Part of the message there is that you need to make sure of what you're dealing with too.
Right.
So, you know, it could be Yellowjackets, or it could be a harmless bee that you just see a lot of, and you actually want to have those harmless bees. And so make sure that you know what kind of an insect it is you're dealing with before you try to eradicate it. Is there any good way to control old-fashioned thistles that's safe for pollinators?
Yes, absolutely. Clipping them, mowing them, digging them out, and getting them before they flower. And the U.S. Fisheries and Wildlife Service did a study and found that consistent clipping for 3 years pretty much removed them. And these were for large-scale plantings, but I think that's kind of a rule of thumb.
Okay.
But keep it up. It's not just a one-time fix.
Yeah.
And then also for clipping it, if we've got somebody in our program, they've got a large acreage planted, and they are getting thistles while they're getting, you know, the natives are growing. You've got to watch too for if you're going to go and mow it all down. You want to wait till after, if you can, after the primary nesting season. So, which is usually in August. So we usually recommend that if they can go out and spot clip them, or spot spraying if it's needed. But a lot of times, just keeping them under control and just, you know, making sure that they're not heading out. There's times I've gone out in the field and somebody has a thistle problem that has really gone out of control, and they're wanting to clip it. Well, if they clip it, you're going to be having so many seeds dispersed. They're better off just leaving it for that year, and then the next year really trying to get a good handle on it and clip it before. And if they can just go out and spot mow it and just kind of watch and make sure that you're not, you know, mowing a whole field during the primary nesting season is really important.
Good.
The next question, does mosquito spray that you put in your yard hurt pollinators?
Insecticides kill bees. Insecticides and fungicides kill bees directly. That's herbicides kill bee food, like dandelions and creeping Charlie and some of the other flowering weeds that they'll kill. So I would say probably yes. Not probably.
Yeah. The last question is, how can we get one of those yard signs?
Oh, well, email us on www.hummingforbees.org. And today we have some, for anyone who is here in the audience, we'd be glad to figure out a way to mail it to you. It'll cost a little more for the mailing.
So I think that those signs are a good way for people to raise awareness and that. So I want to thank everybody. I'm going to do a little summary here, and if there's something else you want to add while I'm summarizing, you certainly can do that. Some of the things that we can do, Patricia outlined them closely. Patricia outlined the things that we can do, and I think that what we need to think about is ourselves personally, our yards, and maintaining our yards. I think that we need to think about advocacy with our cities. Our cities are an extension of ourselves, and so how our city manages our public lands are important. And so think about your parks. We can also approach the county about the libraries. There's a lot of public lands within our areas that can be managed nicely for pollinator habitats. So those are things that we want to start working on. You want to make sure that the plants that you purchase aren't treated, and so that's something that will be important to ask that question. Last year I went to a garden center. I said, were these plants treated with neonicotinoids? They said yes, and I said, okay. I left them sitting on the counter and walked out. And so that's the kind of thing you can do that's a real learning experience for those vendors, and that's important. And then we also want to make sure that we get plants that are healthy, and so that's, we've talked about some of those sources here. I want to thank you all. I want to urge the people in the audience today and anybody that's watching to contact us and sign up for participating with cities in a bee team. Thank you very much.